It's not because anyone is evil. It's because the system isn't designed in a way that is going to make the main thing the main thing. It's like if no one's accountable and it's not the thing that every single person is obsessing about, then yeah, this is going to keep happening. So that's one part of the problem historically.
Cash flow. Cash flow. Did you clear your cash flow?
All right. So, Jess, thank you so much for coming back on the pod. You are the first person I've had back as a repeat guest. Our last episode, what was that? May 30th, 2023. So almost a full year ago at the time of recording this, you were on last time. And I forget what you told me just a moment ago. Did you say you've 10x'd since our last call? Did you say 5 or 10x?
5x.
5x. Okay. That's 1 year, 5x. That is just amazing, to hear the amount of growth, headcount growth, business growth. You've talked about landing new contracts, raising a new funding round. Like it's just amazing to hear everything that's happened in the last year. Can you just catch us up and just give us, a little bit of a brief on kind of what this last year has been like?
Yeah. I just have the biggest smile on my face talking to you because it's so fun to be back here. And I didn't know I'm your first repeat guest. What an honor.
The first one, yep.
Yeah. That's really awesome. And thank you for this opportunity to connect again. I really, really enjoy this. It's fun because the day-to-day is such a grind, especially for me as somebody who is a super passionate workaholic, unapologetically so. And to be able to kind of have these moments where I get to pull out and think more holistically about, oh my gosh, all of the things we've done is such a precious gift. So thank you. Wow, the last year, I can't even believe it's been a year. I feel like I was just talking to you yesterday. So it's incredible to me how much time has actually gone by and how much has happened in that amount of time. So if we were to rewind to this time last year when we were first introduced, where we were as a company was we were serving just over 3,000 kids. We were gearing up for our first ever all staff retreat because we're a fully virtual company. And so we were like, well, we've got to bring people together once a year as an entire company. And as we were planning the retreat, we were anticipating that we would have just under 40 people there. And we had only recently, as of that fall, spun out of the company where we've been incubating. And there was just so much energy and momentum. And we had our Series A. And now, fast forward, we are serving almost 16,000 students nationally.
Wow.
We have just over 100 full-time employees. We have raised a Series B. And I just continue to feel so lucky and so grateful that I get to wake up every day and do this work, trying to figure out how to teach as many kids as possible in our country how to read.
So I want to pick apart how you achieved that growth, but just in case anybody's listening to this for the first time and didn't hear the last episode, can you do maybe a 1 or 2 or 3 minute overview about what Ignite Reading does and kind of why you started the company, the philosophy behind the company, and how you're helping kids learn to read?
Yeah, definitely. So our work that we're doing at Ignite Reading is in service of ensuring that every child can become a confident, fluent reader before they start second grade. And the problem that we're trying to solve is that as a nation, historically, we have not done such a great job teaching kids to read. And our nation's report card shows that fourth graders in our country are reading well below proficiency In fact, what that assessment showed is that 67% of our country's fourth graders are not proficient readers. And the thing about this is that it is a very solvable.
Just really quick, I'm curious, if we go back like a decade or 2 decades, what did that same stat look like?
So this has been a persistent crisis for the last 30 years at
Wow.
least.
Okay.
A lot of people think, oh, well, of course, reading achievement is abysmal. We're coming out of a pandemic and kids were learning on Zoom. So obviously, there's going to be dips. That's not actually the case. In fact, we only dipped by a couple percentage points as a result of the pandemic. This was a crisis before the pandemic, and it is one that goes back a few decades because we as educators have largely ignored the research around how the brain learns to read. Lots of people assume that because learning to speak is a natural process that our brains have evolved to be able to do, that learning to read is also natural, and it's actually not. The brain literally has to be wired, and kids have to get explicit, systematic, direct instruction in order for that wiring to occur, such that you can look at a word and not have to sound it out, but like you can't even think about it, right? Like your brain can't help it. You see ignite on my shirt and you just know and can say ignite. But for that wiring to happen, there needs to be direct instruction. There needs to be lots of practice and repetition. Once this becomes automatic for young kids through, evidence-based instruction, they can then become fluent. And when you're fluent, it means that your brain is freed up to do the most important thing, which is comprehending what you're reading. And for decades, we have ignored what the research shows around how the brain learns to read in favor of techniques that are not grounded in the research and thus did not teach kids to read. And so we have a whole population of children who have not been given equitable access to learning to crack the code so that they can read with fluency and automaticity. And what we're trying to do with Ignite Reading is provide a model that ensures that every child has access to a highly trained reading instructor who will meet virtually with them one-on-one for 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week, to precisely target their decoding gaps in order to ensure they learn to read. And Brian, here's the piece that is like gut-wrenching. Learning to read is something that is supposed to happen starting in kindergarten, and ideally by the end of first grade, before kids start second grade, they are fluently reading connected text. And then as they matriculate through older grades, because they've mastered the code, they can then take on increasingly complex text and also fluently decode that and make meaning of it. We are serving kids in our program today all the way up through high school who still need help learning how to read.
Yeah, that is just, gut wrenching is the word you use to hear those stats. We went into this on the last episode, so I remember our conversation around, some of the reasons why the industry or why the, education organizations aren't following the research necessarily, but could you sort of just summarize that again for any new listeners? Why, if there's all this research out there, why aren't these education organizations following that research and actually implementing what the research is pointing to?
Historically, they haven't, because there hasn't been accountability to do so. And in some cases, in many cases, that is still true. But let me just start with what happened historically. So in school systems in our country, people don't lose their jobs when kids don't learn how to read. And even though there's lots of data out there around how kids are performing and indicating that they're not performing, there's nobody who is saying and sweating, making sure every child learns to read and learns to read on time. And there aren't any like real consequences when they don't. Like, sure, you might get shamed in some way on greatschools.org or on, in certain headlines around abysmal reading stats, but it's not like teachers, school leaders, or superintendents lose their jobs because only 30% of their kids are proficient readers. So that in and of itself, right, if you're not accountable to do something, there's no KPIs around this, then like that nobody's going to take it seriously, right? And it makes it very easy, instead of like rolling up one's sleeves and just owning this problem and figuring out how to have all hands on deck to fix it and tremendous urgency to make sure every child is learning to read on time. Other things become more important, right? And so then kids go year over year not getting what they need. And by the way, like, having been someone who was a classroom teacher, who was a school leader, who's, worked at a district level, I can understand that. It is really hard to be an educator, and every year it gets harder because of the demands that are placed on educators around, like, you're not just trying to be their teacher. In many ways, you're also straddling being a parent and a social worker and all of these other things for these tiny humans that we love so much. So this, in my opinion, it's not because anyone is evil. It's because the system isn't designed in a way that is going to make the main thing the main thing. And so nobody's really, it's like, if no one's accountable and it's not the thing that every single person is obsessing about, then yeah, this is going to keep happening. So that's one part of the problem historically. And then the other piece is that there were folks who were developing programs, one of whom was out of Teachers College at Columbia University in New York City. So you think about that and it's like, oh, Columbia, oh, Teachers College, oh, this professor is saying this is the way to teach reading, and she's publishing all of these materials, and it just feels really nice. Like, who doesn't love the idea of kids just falling in love with beautiful books and sitting in cozy little nooks reading books? And like, yeah, that sounds like a great way for kids to learn how to read. And yes, that is part of falling in love with the act of reading, but that is not actually how you teach kids to read. You can't just surround them with baskets of beautiful books and then expect them to magically learn to read. But the gist of this philosophy and this curriculum that was peddled to school systems across the nation and caught on like wildfire was exactly that. And
in a sense, like lobbying a product to try to, essentially it's a business model, but wasn't serving the individual students in the way that it was promised. Is that kind of the gist of what you're saying?
Yeah, it was, and look, like this woman, like, deeply believed that what she was doing really was best for kids, and that blatantly ignoring the research around how the brain learns to read and instead perpetuating an idea that was patently incorrect, she thought was okay. And, there was sort of this like cult-like following that she had that was not helped by the fact that so many folks who go into the profession of teaching are folks who they themselves did not struggle to learn to read, did not struggle in school, right? And because they didn't often struggle to learn to read, they don't really have a recollection of how they learned to read. And then they they love reading themselves. And so these ideas that she was perpetuating like really resonated. And then part of the rhetoric was also that phonics is boring and it's torturous to kids. And so these ideas really caught on. And then it meant that instructional choices that were made in school systems serving many, many children were not actually in service of ensuring that they learned to read. Now, of course, there were pockets across the country where they weren't buying into that and they were continuing to use an evidence-based approach and using, phonics as a way to teach kids to read. But those were fewer than what was happening in the big picture.
So my mind goes to a thought, and I'm curious for your thoughts on this, but my mind goes to a thought, I hear that schools are underfunded, that, the budgets aren't high enough to be able to pay reasonable wages to teachers. So teachers are often, living on, they're getting paid unlivable wages. Hopefully they have a spouse that can, help supplement. But therefore there's a shortage of teachers because the incentives aren't high enough in the teaching world. That's kind of where my mind goes. And that seems like that would, either compound the problem or potentially be a aspect of the problem itself. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's not a lot of incentive to go into the profession of teaching, which is really sad because it's such an incredible job and it's so rewarding in so many ways and it's so necessary for society, right? And the reality is that as a country, we don't pay teachers very well. We certainly don't prepare them very well after they spend a lot of money to go to a university and be developed to become a teacher. And then they're dropped into a system that is not designed to enable them to be successful. It is really hard once you start teaching to get the amount of professional learning that you need to continue to hone your craft and up your game. Teachers are asked to do far too many things, and there's not a lot of opportunity to really specialize because the system still is very much operating as a factory model, which is how it was designed, over 100 years ago. And
I hear stories too, like they already are not getting paid a living wage, and then they have to go and buy school supplies for their classroom and stuff like it's just wild. That should be a business expense for the school.
Yes. And the pay isn't as competitive as many other jobs that these folks could be getting. And so, the people who are then going into teaching are often driven by a desire to serve, a love for children. They're figuring out how to make it work so that they can do this job, but then very quickly seeing how hard it is to feel successful, including if you are a teacher who year after year is getting kids into your classroom who are not readers, and you're expected to, you're a fifth grade teacher expected to deliver the fifth grade curriculum, and more than half the kids in your class are reading at a first grade level, if even, then there are also behaviors that start to be presented because the kids have internalized that they're not smart, or they've got learning trauma, not for their own fault, right? But because they haven't learned to read and they're older now and they know that they can't do this thing that is so fundamental to being successful in school. So then they're acting out as an avoidance technique. And then as a teacher, you now have an even harder job to do, which is frustrating and makes you feel ineffective and then leads to burnout. And so oftentimes I think about how teaching kids to read on time not only fundamentally changes their, school and life trajectories and the opportunities that are available to them, but also has huge implications for all of these other components of education and also society. So a lot of teacher burnout, I deeply believe, could be avoided if we're making sure that year over year, classroom teachers are getting groups of kids who know how to read and can therefore access the content that a teacher is supposed to be teaching based on grade level standards. And then we think about school culture, we think about graduation rates, we think about math test scores. And, a lot of people don't realize, but literacy also underpins how successful a child can be in mathematics. And we think about mental health and social emotional learning and just like what it feels like to be a young person who can either access what's happening or not access what's happening. And then outside of school, like the societal impact, right? If we can teach kids to read and they can be successful in school and they can graduate, then we're opening up a whole new world in terms of what that means for them economically and how we're breaking cycles of poverty.
Yeah, it's so foundational. And so I appreciate that recap. For anybody listening, Jess and I go like way deeper on this stuff in the last episode. So we'll link to the last episode in the show notes. So if you really like this one, you can go back and listen to the last one as well. So Jess, I would love to just go back to how we started the conversation, pivot back to, what happened this last year. It sounds like it's been, a whirlwind of growth. It sounds like you've, 5x'd your footprint, the impact that you're having on students. And so I'd love to touch on that and also talk about, where you think the next year is going to take you and kind of what the future looks like for Ignite. So let's start with this past year.
Oh my gosh. So I was telling you right before we hit record how much this experience reminds me of being a brand new mom. And so any of your listeners who are parents, you have your newborn and you're just like so sleep deprived. You're doing the thing and you're clearly doing a good job because your baby is thriving. But like you probably haven't showered in a week and eaten a proper meal and gotten adequate rest, and you can't remember anything. But you keep looking at your baby and you are still utterly awestruck. And your baby, before you know it, you blink and they're a toddler, and you blink again and they're going off to kindergarten. And that is exactly what this experience feels like. I truly cannot believe it's been a year since we talked and how much has happened in that year and what it's meant for the scale of our program as we strive to teach as many kids as possible in this country how to read. And something that I might have touched on when we last chatted, but I think about a lot as it relates to this year of rapid growth for us, is that as much as we've grown, we have not grown as much as we could have. So there's the magnitude of this crisis, and then there's also the sheer amount of demand that we've had for our program, because the need is so great and because of the quality of what we're building, and then word of mouth, and as our brand has been growing and more people hear about it and they're like, oh my gosh, we need this. And the reason that we haven't grown as much as we could is because there's been a lot of discipline around not growing so fast, so soon, that we diminish the quality of what we are offering to the kids that we serve. And I wanted to be able to ensure that at each horizon where we were adding more tutors to our program and more partners and thus students to our program and more internal team members and new systems and technology, that we were not diminishing the quality of what we were providing in that one-on-one daily session to kids. And I think this sets us apart from others and probably has also further contributed to the demand for our program and the success of what we're doing insofar as student outcomes. because it would be very easy, and I see this all the time in EdTech, to just scale because you're chasing that top line revenue. And with us, it is about the mission, and it is about making sure that what we are providing is hands down the highest quality, because we are centering kids above all else in this. And then the byproduct of that is that, yes, we're building a phenomenally successful company, but I've had to be so thoughtful and intentional about making sure that we're not going to be a dinosaur with broken legs. And I'm really proud that even as we've grown so much, we've not only maintained these incredible outcomes for our students, we've actually even gotten them to be stronger because of the ways that we're being so strategic about all the things we're learning and the continuous improvement and the tech that underpins that, and.
That's incredible. Kudos on that.
Thank you.
That's really cool. What percentage of your product offering is like a productized e-learning software platform versus this one-on-one tutor relationship that takes place?
So I often feel like I'm such an imposter because I run a tech company and I can't even, figure out how to make Netflix work on my television in my living room. And so the answer to your question is that in terms of the experience for the customer, it is a deeply human experience because it's tutors that are, video conferencing through our secure platform, meeting one-on-one with kids and doing direct instruction that is synchronous. There is no app per se. And what we've figured out how to do at Ignite Reading that is unique in our space is how to scale something that is so human intensive. And typically in EdTech, what you have are a lot of software products, and it's pretty easy to scale a software product. But the problem is that you can't get the quality of outcomes because the act of learning to read is hard. Humans don't like to do hard things. And so when you put an asynchronous app in front of a little kid in a classroom and you say, do this for 15 to 20 minutes a day, and that's how you're going to get extra support to learn how to read, that's not going to work. It's going to work for a very small percentage of kids who are hyper compliant and for whom learning to read is not hard. So they're just going to do the app. But for the vast majority of kids, it's going to look like a head on a desk and them just pressing buttons and not otherwise engaged. And so what we've had to figure out is how to scale something that is so heavily reliant on humans, and what our flywheel is for the recruitment, the development, the ongoing performance management, and the quality control of this tutor force that as of today is, about 1,300 part-time employees. And as we head into the fall, will be at least 2,000.
Wow.
And right, I mean, it's kind of insane. And it's like a classic, entrepreneur problem where, you have this idea, I want to help all these kids learn to read, and I want to teach non-educators to be tutors, and they're going to meet virtually, and it's going to be amazing. And then you start building it and you're like, oh shit, these are people. There's a whole HR side to this that is no small thing that we have to figure out. And we now need to back into all of these pieces around how do you recruit, and not just recruit, but recruit a diverse tutor force, because we want kids to be able to see people who look like them, or, affirm their identities and cultures, or speak their home language. And then how do you train them, right? They go through over 100 hours of paid professional learning and practicum experience. How do you then hold them accountable on an ongoing basis. What does ongoing professional learning look like? It is no small feat the way that we are investing in humans, but that is also leading to these incredible outcomes. And then like this kind of like tech piece behind the scenes, insofar as the platforms that we're building, the ways in which we are collecting student data every single day, and then using that data to hone what it is that we're teaching them the next day to further accelerate their outcomes and teach with precision. Like that's the tech piece. So I think of us as a tech-led company, that is true, but that we have deep pedagogical roots and we are unapologetically human about how we are doing this work.
Yeah, and it's it kind of reminds me a little bit of like, it might not be a great comparison, but kind of like a gig economy sort of
Yes.
business, sort of like Uber.
Yes. Yes. So that is exactly right. So yes, you hit the nail on the head. So when I was in my head trying to figure out how do I fix this problem, right? I was running my previous company. I was spending time volunteering in a classroom here in Oakland, where I live. Fun fact, there's this incredible documentary film, the Right to Read film, that actually tells the story of the teacher I was mentoring and how she learned to teach her kids to read. And that was the impetus for this idea around Ignite Reading, because I'm teaching her, but I've also got this lens towards like, this isn't enough. This is one teacher in one classroom, but how do you scale some of the things that are happening here in order to enable every child in our country to have this quality of instruction? And I was then also, as the pandemic hit and we switched to teaching on Zoom, and I was helping her transition what we've been doing in the classroom to a virtual environment. And I was watching and I was seeing how they were learning to read. And I just kept thinking, like, there's a model here. But classroom teachers have to be teaching during the day. And so how do we augment what a classroom teacher can do while also building this core of highly trained reading instructors who aren't educators, because educators are working, in schools? Because if we can have as many people as possible in our country who know how to teach kids to read, then beyond the container of Ignite Reading and the program that I'm building, there's like a really powerful societal ripple effect. Because when you know how to teach a child to read, it has implications for how you parent or grandparent. It has implications for your community, because at church, you will very quickly become known as like the person who knows how to teach kids to read. And then everyone who has a child who needs help learning to read is going to be coming to you and seeking wisdom from you. And so it's like this gift that can keep giving. And I am not arrogant enough to believe that my program alone can solve this crisis. We need as many people as possible who know how to do this. So then in my mind, it was like, this needs to be like an Uber for reading tutoring, right? And that you can kind of like get certified, know how to do this, and then pick up these tutoring shifts, have this incredible experience teaching kids to read, but also probably have some other things going on in your life that you're also doing. So interestingly, what we see is that our tutors will go through their certification, they'll emerge from certification, they will be able to work up to 30 hours a week tutoring. When they first start, they're tutoring maybe, an hour and a half a day. And then this thing starts to happen where they start taking on more and more and more kids. And we have some tutors who are tutoring like 20 plus kids every single day, because honestly, there's not many things that are more emotionally gratifying than what it feels like to take a child who can't read a single word and over the course of the next few months, get them to a place where they are reading sentences and paragraphs fluently. And then to know that the reason that happened is because of you. It like creates a sense of purpose. I think at a time when people like desperately crave that. And it's not hyperbole to say that to teach a child to read is literally life-changing work. And to know that you're the change maker that catalyzed that it's emotionally intoxicating. So our tutors like might have other plans to maybe drive Uber, but they're going to spend almost all of their time teaching adorable kids to read.
I want to take a quick break from the episode and say, if you're enjoying this content, the best way you can say thank you is to subscribe. So if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you're on one of the podcast platforms, hit the subscribe button there as well. And also share it out to your friends and colleagues. If you find this content useful and you think other people will enjoy it as well, please send it out. And back to the episode. While you were saying all that, I was just thinking about before we started recording, we were talking about market pull, and you weren't entirely sure if you were feeling market pull effects, but like, you know, you're a two-sided marketplace essentially, in a way. Like you've got the tutors that are, you know, one side of your marketplace, you've got the students that are the other side of your marketplace, and you're the facilitator that, you know, creates the structure for the marketplace, creates, you know, it's more than a marketplace business, obviously. You've got an entire methodology and process for things, but, you know, it's two-sided business. And exactly what you just described is like a market pull effect on the tutor side.
Okay, this is so funny. I'm like building this incredible business, and there is so much about how I operate that is like totally clueless about these business things. Because you were describing market pull to me before this conversation. I'm like, yeah, I don't think we do that. But then like, okay, yeah, it sounds like we do that.
It's like when the market's like pulling the product out of you, like when the market needs the product faster than you can give it to the market. Like your tutors, they come in, they're like, oh, I'll see what this is, and then, you know, they go in and they're like, wow, this is amazing. And then, you know, they're doing 1 hour a day, 2 hours a day, you know, 4 hours a day. Like they just keep incrementing up their investment because they love doing what they're doing. And, you know, obviously they need to be comped monetarily for it, and, you know, you obviously do that, but then there's, you know, you know, like the experience that they're getting is also like, you know, it sounds like that's part of the compensation, or part of the, you know, part of, you know, what makes them want to do it.
Right. It's that emotional gratification. It's feelings of connection, even in a virtual environment. I think that it just fills a cup for so many people, and they get hooked and they want to keep doing it. And so we see really high retention as well from one program horizon to the next, which has been great for us operationally. I think a lot about the implications for the teacher talent pipeline also. As somebody who came into education through an alternative pathway, you know, I didn't study becoming a teacher in undergrad. I thought I was going to be a lawyer because I saw Legally Blonde and was like, that.
you couldn't have gone in a more different direction.
Right. And then I had this opportunity to go and teach in New York City and have a 6-week crash course over the summer to get an alt certification, and started teaching, and was very quickly, it was clear to me like there was so much that was not okay, and I decided I was going to stay in education and find a way to ensure that no teacher who started teaching ever felt the way I did, which was like wanting desperately to teach my 5th graders to read and having no idea how. And so when I think about our program, I think about how we have access to so much talent through what we're doing, and we are developing them to be stronger reading teachers at this point than I even was when I was in a classroom teaching kids to read. And we've just got this like methodology around how we are doing this. And I'm like, wouldn't it be so cool if this were the springboard to them then being able to get some type of alt certification that would allow them to then get a job teaching in a school district? Because the money they're making through us, I mean, I think it's a great paying gig economy job, right? You get to be virtual and you don't have to drive anywhere. And, from the waist down, you're wearing your pajamas like I am literally right now. And you get to hang out with cute kids and teach them to read. But like, we're not paying folks enough, and our model isn't such that, you could build a career out of being a tutor and make a level of money that can have like real significant impact financially for your family. But I think that there's a really elegant on-ramp that we're building to enable them to then step into the profession of education and be really successful. Because one of the things that impedes a teacher from feeling successful and being successful is whether or not they are going to be able to teach all the babies in front of them how to read if they don't know how to read.
That's an amazing vision. I love the becoming the standard for elementary school reading education, becoming the certification. If you want to be an English teacher or, a K-5 teacher, this certification is, it needs to be on your resume.
Yes, it means something. It's perceived by external folks, school systems, for example, HR offices at school systems as, oh, wow, this person's coming in with an Ignite reading certification, jump on that.
That's an amazing vision. I love that vision.
Yeah. It's something I'm working on right now. And I think about how, like, even just to become a tutor in our program, this past fall, we had a recruitment horizon of 600 seats we needed to fill based on new partners and whatnot coming on in the fall. And I remember the conversations with senior leadership and us just being like, oh my gosh, this is going to be our biggest recruitment horizon ever. Are we going to be able to find 600 tutors? And so we open up the recruitment window, we start collecting the applications, and over the course of like a month had over 10,000 applicants.
Wow.
And so my head of tutor operations, who's super savvy with data, like he'd be sending me these notes via Slack each day with like fun facts, like it is more competitive to be a tutor in our program than it is to get into Harvard. And I just think that's so cool. Like,
you can't buy your way in either, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, that's meaningful. That's a big deal. And that is something that we need to be celebrating as the like bar to get into this program. It is a huge deal if you are accepted, and it is an even bigger deal if you make it through certification, given the rigor and demands of that certification. And then once you emerge from certification, like, you're pre-certified, but it's the number of tutoring hours you then amass after that and the outcomes for kids that you're able to demonstrate. It's all of these other metrics that go into being like really and truly certified by us. And I want it to be the gold standard in the industry, because that is what our kids in America's classrooms deserve. They deserve nothing less than the most excellent instructors in front of them every day, teaching into their needs and ensuring that they're going to be successful in school and therefore more likely to be successful in life.
Well, if your next few years are anything like your last year, I have a feeling you'll be back on the pod in a few years telling me about how Ignite Reading is now the standard.
Oh my God. It's like a year from now, we'll meet again and I'm going to be like completely gray and probably so haggard if we keep going at this rate, which would be such a high quality problem to have.
How do you get first of all, how do you get 10,000 applicants for these like cohorts of hiring rounds or whatever you call them, onboarding rounds? And so that's the first question. Second one is, what is the process that if you can share a few, just a few aspects of it, like what is your process to, actually vet and qualify and then I guess maybe train and onboard these tutors?
Yeah, I'm writing down all your questions so that I can
re-ask too if you
answer them.
I have a habit of like
I get
stringing
going
through
and then I'm on a tangent and I'm like, what were we talking about? So interestingly, we spend very little in terms of per tutor cost to recruit, which actually then means that we can allocate more to investing in their development. And recruitment to date has basically looked like the application on our website, ignitereading.com, some posts on LinkedIn, and then I think a post on Indeed. And
that's it. You drive all that demand. Is it just that many people in the industry that are looking, or is it the brands that they know and there's like people just waiting in line for those posts to go up? Or
I have no idea. I don't know. And honestly, I know that the person on my leadership team who is in charge of all of this would have a lot of thoughts here. So me saying I don't know, I'm feeling kind of proud of myself because I'm like, oh, good job, distributive leadership.
It's a sign of a good CEO.
Yeah, right. But I will say that the experience of the tutors in our existing core and word of mouth and the number of folks who are applying because someone they know is a tutor or they have observed our program in a school, maybe even their child's school. Like the word of mouth effect is really strong. And that makes me so proud of the company that we're building. Because by the way, like we are still a startup. I have to remind people of this constantly. Like, yeah, I know we've grown quickly and we've experienced lots of success, but we are still a startup, which means that our incredible tutor core has experienced a lot of change, a lot. Because we're not just a startup, we're a startup that's led by someone who color codes their bookshelf and is
I just noticed that when he pointed it out.
Right? And is obsessed with continuous improvement. So it's like we're seeing something's not working. I'm not going to sit on it and wait till the next program year to fix it. We are going to figure out how to fix it and change it now. And then the tutors are going to need to be retrained. So this core of ours has stuck with us through this hyper growth and has seen, some of them are like OGs from when we were using Zoom. Then they experienced us switching to a platform. Then they experienced curricular shifts in service of further honing outcomes for kids. Then they experienced the rollout of like the way that our internal platform collects data. And what's been really awesome is that every step along the way, they're like, you all never stop. Like you never stop figuring out how to make this better for us as tutors and better for kids. And you're constantly listening to our feedback also, and then further, tweaking and iterating from there. And that's really cool to be on this journey with you. So it just like surprises me that they would still recommend us to people, given what we've put them through. But, I do think the word of mouth piece is very real for us. And then, they find the application, they apply. There's a whole process we have in place behind the scenes where answers to certain questions may immediately knock them out of the process. And then as they kind of move through the funnel, we've got team members who are all over that component. And, once they are accepted into the program, they are then going through this very intensive experience that's a combination of asynchronous course content via our learning management system. And then in-person synchronous sessions that are largely meant to be, okay, you watched this module, you learned about this thing. Now in a supportive coaching environment with a small group that is like your cohort with an assigned learning and development coach, we're going to try these things on. And we're going to do all of this over the course of, approximately 3 weeks before we then move into building working memory, applying these things to working with actual kids, but in a like scaffolded, supported environment. So it's a gradual release model. We're going to wrap around you intensively with like a lot of accountability metrics. So you have checks for understanding that you're doing as part of the asynchronous content. We've got a tutor performance management team who is all over all of this data. We're noticing not just are you mastering the content, but how are you showing up professionally? Are you late every time we have a synchronous session? That's going to be a problem, because if you're showing up late to meet with me for coaching, you're going to be showing up late to meet with your kid also. And this is a 15-minute session. Every second counts. You must be punctual. So we're going to give you that feedback with an expectation that you immediately improve. And if you don't, then you're going to be terminated from the program. And we have the ability to be really persnickety because we're not at the whim of, our workforce. We have more demand to be in our program than spots in our program. So for any given horizon, we're going to have a buffer of additional folks accepted into the program, because we know over the course of certification that not everyone is going to make it through. And what we're trying to do is ensure that the folks who do graduate, that once they're then released with ongoing accountability on a weekly basis versus a daily basis, that we can confidently say the quality of the tutor that we are putting in front of every single child is excellent. There is little to no variability, and we have a belt and suspenders approach to guarantee that behind the scenes.
That's amazing. It's extremely process oriented. You've got so many checks and balances at every level. The word of mouth factor. I mean, there's something special there. The amount of people you have lined up to get in the door as a tutor, and the people bringing existing tutors bringing more tutors in. That's an amazing, amazing signs there.
And I'm just really, really proud of like the brand that we're building and what this feels like, whether you are in our tutor core or a child or a classroom teacher who has 20 kids every day who are doing Ignite reading, and what it feels like to have 20 highly trained instructors coming into your classroom virtually each day helping you. I wish I had that when I was a teacher. And I know that teachers feel deeply supported by this, and very quickly they're like, how do I get more kids on Ignite reading? I want more of this. And it's really cool to have an idea, to begin building it, and then to go out into schools where we're working and see kids learning to read, so many kids learning to read. And then that feels incredible. But then what is even more amazing is how this is embraced by all of the educators. And it just makes me really proud. But I also think it's because, I am coming into this with this lived experience and this deep expertise around teaching and learning and how to, build and scale things. And I've surrounded myself with a team of people who are all smarter than me. And together we're creating this thing that really embodies such deep empathy for all of the stakeholders that we really care about. But at the same time, it is like unapologetically setting a ridiculous, rigorous bar insofar as excellence.
Do you have the same sort of like wait list thing on the student side like you do on the tutor side as well? Like there's students lined up like waiting to get into the program?
Yes, when we partner with schools, typically, they're purchasing a certain number of seats based on their budget and based on what they're seeing in their data. But, budgets aren't unlimited. And sometimes, they have to choose, here are the 100 kids that we are going to prioritize first. And now here is a wait list we have of another 100 plus kids who ideally we would also like to have in the program so that as this first group starts cycling out, we're ready to go with other kids to pop into those seats. And
Do the parents ever like self-fund it to get their students in faster or?
They don't. That's a really great question. So this kind of like connects to your market pull wondering. If I'm using that term correctly. And typically when I first learn a new term, especially like a business or techie term, I don't use it correctly, but let me try.
I think you got it.
We have a lot of demand from parents for a direct to parent model. And it is so tempting to go there because we want to help as many kids as possible learn to read. And arguably, like our infrastructure is such that we could make that happen. We're choosing not to right now because the historic inequity in education is that the parents who have the means go and get tutoring outside of the school day. And you have this whole shadow system in education. And the kids whose families don't have the means don't get the extra support they need. And what I don't want to happen at this stage of our company is for us to be distracted by the higher socioeconomic status families who have the means to get this support for their kids. And then we're not doing what we originally set out to do from a mission standpoint, which is ensure that all kids have equitable access learning to read. And I am most concerned about the kids in our country who are most at risk, most marginalized, most vulnerable, and making sure that we're going to help educators deliver on what the promise of public education is supposed to be, which is that like every child gets an excellent education.
Yeah, that's a really good point there. And it sounds like you have basically your tutors, they come in and they're just fully utilized as much time as they're willing to give. They're already, spoken for with your student backlog essentially.
Yeah, or even just like additional partner backlog, right? Like other districts who are lining up wanting to work with us and wanting to put, lots of kids in the program. And we're saying, listen, we're at capacity. You could do a limited pilot this school year and then, come work with us in the fall and you can have more seats. But then typically what we see happening is that schools will start in the fall with one set of seats and then later in the fall expand and add even more seats. And then we just kind of keep expanding over the course of the new school year while also having new partners come in. So it's been interesting to watch like the behavior in the market and like how they purchase and how they engage.
I think your company is going to get really big. You've literally got, you're throttling both sides, where you have a marketplace business and you're throttling both sides of it because you want to keep the quality of the product intact, but you've got more demands from every angle than you're processing right now. So as you continue to build a bigger engine that, continues to deliver the same quality of service, I think I think you're gonna have a really big company here.
It is crazy to think about. I mean, I'm still wrapping my head around the fact that in June, when we do our all staff retreat this year, I will have over 100 employees there. And there's definitely, I've always been someone in like building companies that's, you know, been one of the first employees. And I thought it was cool when we got to 30 people. And I thought it was cool when we got to 60 people. And now we're at 100 people and it's still only just the beginning. And it's kind of wild to think about where we could be this time next year. And there's this part of me that is like, can I do this? You know, like imposter syndrome is particularly with my inner voice. I mean, it is just, it's real and I've learned to embrace it. And
I mean, you said something that's, I think, the most important skill besides the vision. Like, obviously, you've got the vision. You know, everyone listening knows you've got the vision. But to be a good CEO, more than just vision, you also have to surround yourself with a good team. So you've got this amazing vetting process for your tutors. It sounds like you probably vet for people who share your vision and your passion for the mission, as well for your internal employees. And you've already, you know, we were talking about the metrics on the tutor pipeline, and you're like, you know, actually, I have a person that handles that, and I don't really know. And that's actually a good thing for a CEO, in my opinion. I think the better you are at delegating and letting go of, you know, certain details, or certain details that, if it's related to vision and strategy, the CEO, in my opinion, should continue to own. But I think, you know, when you get into the minutia, the better you are at letting go and delegating to competent people that you trust, the more effective you're going to be at building a big company.
yes, yes, that is exactly right. And I do really pride myself on, you know, building a team and ensuring that they can really own things, and then knowing through experience and pattern recognition when to dip in versus when to just let them go. Like, they've got this. I don't need to worry about it. And so right now, as it relates to the tutor recruitment piece, there's so many parts of it where I'm like, this is a well-oiled machine, and keep at it. And then there are pieces where I am more involved, which are around pieces like tutor diversity, which we've seen as we've scaled rapidly, that we can't just rely on a simple post in order to build the diverse core that we envision. There are actually more intentional strategic tactics we need to employ to build the top of funnel with more diverse candidates. And so those are the places where I would lean into something more granular and then quickly pull out once that strategy is moving along. And then I'm just monitoring the KPIs, and, you know, it's a game of whack-a-mole. I'm like, okay, this things are fine here. And then you like turn and you look the other way and you're like, oh, hell no. And then you're like dipping back in, you get that all like fixed and moving and cleaned up. And then you turn and there's like 5 other things that you're just like, what?
I know all too well exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Jess, I could talk to you for hours. I mean, our first episode was awesome. This one was awesome. We should just make May our month and just, you know,
Let's
get
do
you on
that.
again next May.
Yes, I would love that. That would be so much fun.
Is there anything else that I didn't touch on that you were hoping to get to in this episode, or anything you want to close on? Any plugs? You know, you got 700 of these tutor roles coming up by the fall. Do you want to tell people where to apply for that? Anything specific?
So anyone who's curious about what we're up to, because they either want to be a tutor or they're like, this CEO sounds like she's so awesome, I want to work for her. Or they run a school or a school system and have kids that need help learning to read, you can go to our website, ignite-reading.com, and learn all about us. And I am just really grateful for this opportunity, Brian. I mean, I had a board meeting yesterday and I shared with the board that it's really refreshing to have these moments where I can kind of like pull out of the craziness of what's happening on the dance floor and just like be on the balcony and survey what's happening and be like, wow, we're doing it. There's a million more things I want to do, but we've come really far in a short amount of time. And I am so very proud of what we've been able to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super impressed. You're the real deal at this thing.
Thank you.
flow?